Hello and welcome to the Gooner Talk. Back again with you guys for what is our Arsenal transfer show. A sniffly one. I'm going to be very honest. It has finally reached me. That's something that I'm sure a lot of you in the UK have been experiencing over the last couple of weeks. There is a bug going round. In fact, I think there's a number of bugs, and I think they've found a way to fly because they are infecting absolutely everybody, and everyone's seemingly getting this winter cold. I know it comes around every year, but it's finally got to me. And this is going to be a struggle, this show, actually, if I'm honest. I'm going to try and put the brave face on. I'm going to try and keep the sniffling to a minimum and certainly be utilizing my mute button as much as possible. But if you do hear anything, I'd like to apologize in advance. And of course, I will do my best and endeavor to keep you as away from that as I can. Don't worry, I don't think it's managed to work its way into the internet systems just yet. So you're safe. Yeah, do bear with me because I am not on top form today. But thank you to everyone that's tuned in. Is very much appreciated. Morning to Matt G, to Pam, to Derek, to Damien. Good morning to Black Shine, to Paul, Old Dave, NSW, Silky, Lars, Wale. We've got Rich and Maximius and Mark and Barry, Temmie, John, Old Dave, Jose, Louis. We've got Johnny and Stephen and Franklin, Tony. Thank you to all of you for tuning in. Very, very kind of you indeed. Thank you for continuing to support the channel. This community is absolutely everything to me. So thank you for those that continue to do so. There's going to be some changes in the brand new year, I'm expecting. And the channel is going to benefit significantly from these changes. I can't wait to explain to you what that is and why that is and what changes are going to be going on that is going to make hopefully your listening experience to this even better and more frequent as well. But I do want to tell you as well that this evening I'll be joined by guests at 5 o'clock UK time. James Green will be returning, Sky reporter, for a good chat about the Arsenal, a chat ahead of Liverpool, of course, and where we kind of stand in the world of football as a club as well. So make sure you set your alarms for 5 p.m. UK time for that one. So that's going to be very exciting indeed. Right, let's crack on with today's stories, shall we? We should probably start with yesterday's managerial news. Steve Cooper sacked as head coach of Nottingham Forest, one of the earlier managerial, victims, I suppose, of the managerial merry-go-round. We saw Heckingbottom sacked as Sheffield United boss. Now we're seeing Nottingham Forest move on from their own head coach. And Nuno Tavares, as we talked about yesterday in yesterday's show, has been very frustrated with a lack of minutes. Nuno Espirito Santo, the Portuguese coach, is joining the club, or at least we expect him to be joining the club very soon. He is in Nottingham holding talks over being appointed, to my understanding. And he could be the manager to maybe revive the career, if you like, of Nuno Tavares, a compatriot. There's maybe a better chemistry, perhaps, between those two. So let's wait and see if indeed he is given the opportunity to play and if Arsenal's potential buy option is saved. £12 million is what we're expected to get from a buy option in that deal. If not, Arsenal may have to make a decision about the player's future. The League Cup quarterfinals took place yesterday. There is one more to take place. Liverpool-West Ham, of course, tonight. Liverpool play against Arsenal on Saturday, so we'll only have 2 days gap between, of course, this game tonight and Arsenal's visit to Anfield. Last night's games had plenty of drama, 2 penalty shootouts. Newcastle United looked to be heading into the semi-finals relatively comfortably until Kieran Trippier made not just one, but 2 huge mistakes. The first one, of course, a poor touch, allowing Mykhailo Mudryk in the 92nd minute to score in rather dramatic fashion. And then, of course, he missed his penalty, which allowed Chelsea to go through perfectly with their own spot kicks into a League Cup semi-final. Liverpool remain very much the favourites for the competition. Arsenal, of course, eliminated by West Ham a fair few weeks ago now. And I do still think that certainly that Chelsea will not win this tournament. I'm very fortunate to get that result yesterday, but certainly Liverpool will be looking at this as a huge opportunity now to win. Not only that, but Fulham get into the semi-finals as well. They beat Everton at Goodison Park on penalties as well. And Middlesbrough beating Port Vale 3-0 to reach the semi-finals. Also, of course, all the Premier League teams will be hoping that Middlesbrough will be the team that they are lining up against. But it was a comprehensive win against Port Vale. So maybe people should not underestimate Borough at all. Xhaka has opened up about his time leaving Arsenal in a fantastic interview with The Athletic, which I recommend that you read in its entirety. He talked about how he's changed since leaving Arsenal. He says, I'm different. My mentality is completely different. I'm much calmer. There's much more clarity and deliberation in my game. I knew and know when to push, and I know when to fall back. I know when to speed up the game and when to slow it down. When I was younger, there were many yellow cards and red cards, and it was the same. It was the same at the beginning in England. Experience teaches you that you don't always have to go for the risky tackle. You can keep running with the player. You don't have to go down all the time. I've made a huge step forward in the way that I approach games. He also spoke very kind of openly about the respect that he felt was lacking at Arsenal at the point in which he nearly left the club. He spoke to Mikel Arteta about staying when he had that incident with Unai Emery and the losing of the captaincy against Crystal Palace. He says, I had many black days sitting in my hotel for away games, realizing what had happened. I was completely devastated. The club showed me little respect, even though I was the captain. It was clear they wanted to get rid of me as quickly as possible, apart from one person, Mikel Arteta. When I met him for the first time, my bags were already packed and I was about to hop on a plane. With my heart and soul, I had already left the club. I said to him, the solution is for me to go. Mikel told me he wanted me to stay. Even then, Xhaka's dad insisted his son should move. For the first time ever, he told me to run away. He says, I could not imagine myself playing for Arsenal again. I said to him, I just want to be somewhere the fans don't boo me. But he was so convincing for the first time in my life. I took a decision without taking or talking to my family first. I got up and said, okay, I'll stay. We embraced. And from that day on, I returned to training and it was like nothing ever happened. A real amazing story, in all honesty. I know that Granit Xhaka is not everybody's cup of tea. I know that he is not going to be fondly remembered by all. And that's okay. You can have your opinions. You can have your views on Granit Xhaka, and that's fine. But I think that this story, what it tells you is the type of person that Mikel Arteta is as well. And I think it tells you how he is as a person, how he is with his players, and how convincing he can play, which will, and I assume will stand us in good stead when it comes to discussing potential incomings. And I think that has been reflected in the players that Arsenal have managed to sign. I imagine that Kai Havertz, if you think about him for a moment, being, really talked about in such scathing terms by fellow Chelsea supporters. Would he really want to move to another English team? Well, Real Madrid were keen and Bayern Munich were keen, but Mikel Arteta convinced Havertz was the place for him. Declan Rice had interest from Manchester City. Could have guaranteed him trophies, guaranteed him a title race, guaranteed him a run at the Champions League. But he's chosen Arsenal, and Mikel Arteta was a huge part of that. Whether you rate our manager or not, one thing that is not even debatable at this point is the manager's character, how he commands respect from his players and how his players think about him, if indeed they are willing to give 100%. It's not always been easy, and certainly players like Matteo Guendouzi and Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang have certainly stood as examples. If you don't fall in line, if you don't respect the coach, if you don't respect the club, then sadly you will not be in a position to continue. But if you're a fighter, and I think that Granit Xhaka always, despite the incident which we saw, and I for one understand his reaction, I don't agree with how he responded, but I certainly empathise and understand with why he reacted the way he did against Crystal Palace, which for some was the end of their time supporting him. But no Arsenal player deserves to be booed ever. In my opinion, it's not what a supporter does. The clue is in the word. You support players through the ups and the downs. You can be critical and in private and, without maybe talking publicly on social media and tagging them in posts that you can say what you want to a degree. But when it comes to being public, you can be critical, but there's a line and you don't cross that. And I think it was crossed with Granit Xhaka. Number of times, especially with his family as well. But a really good interview on The Athletic. I recommend you go and read it in its entirety. According to Simon Collins, despite links with Jakub Kiwior to Napoli and to we've seen Milan also interested in him as well. Despite these links, Arsenal will resist any attempts to try and sign the Polish international. which I think is a good thing. I think Arsenal certainly need to keep hold of Jakub Kiwior. He's good depth for the squad. He's got potential. I think he's shown some real promise. And unless Arsenal get a very significant bid for the player, I'll be very surprised indeed if he was to go. The Bournemouth owner, Bill Foley, has said that the door to signing Dominik Solanke and any other players who are performing really well is both closed and bolted shut. Bill Foley speaking to, I think it was BBC Radio Solent, about the potential of exits in January. We know that Arsenal hold an interest in Solanke. That interest, I certainly can confirm, is real. I've done some chasing up on this in the last couple of weeks. That interest is certainly it exists. Whether or not he's the primary is a different question. But Arsenal's interest in Solanke is certainly there and does exist as a player that they are keen and impressed by. However, the idea of signing him in January appears to be, at least for the moment, it appears to be a tricky one. So I don't think it's going to happen in January. As I've said a number of times, I'll be very surprised if Arsenal do land a striker in January, but it is one that will continue to be looked towards the summer, and maybe then we will see. We'll see Solanke as one of the options that is approached. And speaking of strikers in our headline story, Brentford director Lee Dykes saying that a decent transfer fee is what is needed for Ivan Toney. So Toney is not for sale. It is if he is to leave, they would need a significant transfer fee to convince them, to tempt them into selling Ivan Toney. We've talked about strikers at length. I've talked about Ivan Toney and my thoughts around whether or not he's the right player for Arsenal to go for at length, so I don't need to go into too much more detail on that. But regarding the transfer fee and what that might be, I can't imagine it would be any less than 50, 60 million, perhaps even more than that. I've seen suggestions of 80 million pounds brought up before. His contract does expire in 2024, and there is question marks about his match fitness, of course, having not played so far at all this season. However, he has been keeping himself fit. He's not been injured, so that is obviously something to consider. And he has been, I think, involved in a couple of friendly, non-competitive games that he has been able to take part in. So he is, to a degree, in a better position to perhaps players who are injured for this amount of time would be. But the situation continues to be very fluid and open. But we'll keep you up to date with anything on this. As I've maintained, despite him not being my personal pick, any player that Mikel Arteta deems the right player to join Arsenal, I'm going to be backing and supporting and hoping that they succeed. And ultimately, in the case of Toney, prove me wrong. Right, let's go to part 2 and your questions right after this. Oh, I'll tell you what, there's nothing quite like a good cup of tea when you're not feeling your best. I'm not going to go ASMR on you and do some slurping noises, but goodness me, I can tell you, and I can confirm to those listening on Spotify without the audio, a cup of tea is quite the one when you're not feeling 100%, as I am not this morning. Shall we jump into the chat and tackle some of your questions? Throw them at me. If you've got any questions about anything, throw them in. Well, I mean, to a degree, I'm not qualified to discuss kind of the meaning of life, but to a degree, you can throw as many questions as you like. If you haven't already, of course, dropped a like on the video, please do. And subscribe to the channel. We hit 53,000 subscribers recently, and we're already on our way to 54, which is crazy. So thank you for those that continue to support always. Let's go to JP says Solanke is a depressing link for me. Now, I tweeted when we were first linked to Ivan Toney and first the story emerged, there was interest from Arsenal in the player, that I thought it was an underwhelming link. That's how I described it. And I don't want to say I regret that tweet in any way, because you stand by what you're saying, but maybe I was too quick to judge. I've been doing quite a bit of watching Dominik Solanke in the last couple of weeks and looking into his performances this season. And whilst I certainly think that he falls into the same kind of category for me as Toney and Watkins, I don't think it'd be fair actually to categorize him as like a player that's significantly below their level, especially when you look at some of his numbers. For instance, last season, or perhaps no, is it last season? This season, sorry, he's managed 0.6 non-penalty goals and assists per 90. Now, last season, Ivan Toney was 0.55. So that tells you something interesting about kind of how the goals he's producing this season. And if you like what you saw of Ivan Toney last season, well, from a goal contribution standpoint, Solanke's actually bettering what Toney did last season this season. That might come as a surprise to a lot of you. So I absolutely understand why some people are going to be underwhelmed, as I was by this link, but maybe it's not one that we should be so disparaging against immediately, if that makes sense. Ashley says, what is the plan for Zinni at Anfield? Clive mentioned from 65-minute onwards is not mentally, physically switched on. Bring Kiwior on early, rush Partey just for the 20 minutes, play at right back, move everyone across. I think it depends on the scoreline, of course, Ashley. If we are happening to lead at Anfield and we go into the final 20 minutes of the game, certainly I would not be wanting Zinchenko holding the line against Mohamed Salah. There's an argument that maybe not even at all against Mohamed Salah next weekend. Gabriel has got a massive, massive job on his hands when it comes to coping with what Mohamed Salah is going to bring to the team. A lot of people ask why Kieran Tierney didn't get on the field quick enough last time. Well, actually, Kieran Tierney nearly cost us the entire game when he came onto the field, ironically, at Anfield last season. So it's not as cut and dry as saying, well, Zinchenko's the worst possible option. I think Kiwior is a better defender and offers better defensive security than what Zinchenko does, just from his nature of being a centre-half, and his defensive numbers are also very decent too. I think you'd need to add an extra defender in. Yes, you technically would invite pressure, but it depends upon the scoreline. I also think we're a better team than we were last year. I also think having Declan Rice is a massive, massive boost that we didn't have last time out. Partey's presence, I guess we will have to wait and see if indeed we have that. So yeah, let's see what happens. But I think it's going to be very exciting, the game on Saturday, and I'm excited to see what Arsenal are capable of doing. Let's go to Boss, who says, if we were to go for Osimhen, would our play style change and possibly cause problems next season? Did Man City's play style change when they brought in Erling Haaland? Yes. Did it cause problems? Maybe a bit at the start, but certainly they went on to win a treble. So you can't exactly suggest that the changing of a style because one player comes in is going to be such a detrimental impact to the side that it's going to stop you from succeeding. I think Osimhen is obviously a fantastic centre forward. I think that things would certainly adapt and change for him arriving. But it doesn't mean that Jesus leaves, remember, and I think that maybe Osimhen himself would adapt and change and improve in his own ability and character by joining Arsenal, or be expected to do more than perhaps he's doing at Napoli and that he had done previously at Lille. People always think about that it's the club that changes around the players they sign, but maybe we should be more open to the idea that actually, if we sign somebody like an Osimhen, maybe they should be the ones that also, to a degree, have to change and be open and malleable to that change. So, yeah, I think there's certainly an argument there that there's change and adaptation on both sides of the river rather than just the one. JKO says, Tom, the excuse for some fans would be that they are supporters of the club rather than the players. I guess you might, excuse is a good word. If you're a supporter of the club, you support its players as well, and that means you don't cross a line. Anyone abusing players is simply not an Arsenal fan. It's just a matter of fact. Hildegun says, how do you think someone like Antonio Nusa at Bruges might fit, or let him go to perhaps Chelsea? Nusa's a really exciting player, of course, Norwegian international as well. He falls into that trio of Haaland, Ødegaard, and himself. Very quick, exciting, and Chelsea are interested. Arsenal have been mentioned in links to him as well. So I guess we'll have to wait and see whether or not that turns out to be a player that we are indeed interested in. But he is an exciting player. He's an exciting talent. But I don't know whether or not we end up moving for him. But he's got that pace and speed and skill that I think we are looking for. So again, as we say, we'll have to wait and see. Right. Let's go to Alex, who says, my family are all in Bournemouth. My dad said he'd be happy to see Solanke move to us. He's always said seeing any player move up is what he's happy with. It's interesting, I suppose, from the point of view of fans of different clubs, it's sad to see your players leave, but there is an inevitability about it for some clubs, and seeing players move on to bigger and better things can be, in some ways, fulfilling from those points of view. I remember when I was, my dad is a massive Gillingham fan, and so when Matt Jarvis left Gillingham, went off to play for Wolves and eventually West Ham, and then for England, he got a cap as well. It was a really amazing thing to see that happen. So I can understand that perspective, and I think it certainly does make sense, but maybe Bournemouth should be a little bit, what's the word? Selfish. I mean, you look at Brighton. Brighton's a really good example of a club that have turned around and said no a number of times. They did it for Caicedo and McAllister for a while. They've done it with Matoma. They've signed him up to a new deal. Evan Ferguson. It comes to a point where Brighton can't just let every player go over and over and over again. Because if they want to compete and they want to challenge for European places like they did last season, then they also need to keep hold of players. You know, they can't just allow players to leave season after season after season. Look at Aston Villa, for instance. You know, they're not going to want to lose Ollie Watkins or Douglas Luiz, and they're going to be putting big price tags on those players to try and scare teams off. And they've already signed up Douglas Luiz to a brand new deal like they did in 2022. I'm sure I think they've just agreed a new deal with Ollie Watkins as well. So I think Brighton and Aston Villa are good examples of what changes for teams at the same time. You look at Grealish leaving, Villa won't want to see that happen again. And Jacob Ramsey is a good example of that, I think, as well. I think Jacob Ramsey is, in particular, a good example of where they want to see another young player that's come through the academy leave either. Let's go to Daryl says Zinchenko guarantees the opposition a 1-2 clear goal opportunities every game. Now, look, defensively, Zinchenko has his flaws. That is what you come to accept when it comes to Zinchenko. The fact of the matter is that the fact of the matter is that Zinchenko offers so much going forwards. The progression, the importance that he has in the team, the impact he has on the side, all of those things are outweighing the drawbacks of Zinchenko's game. Arsenal are a better team because Zinchenko is in it. Arsenal are a level above what they were with Kieran Tierney in the team since Zinchenko moved in. And that is evidenced by the fact that as soon as he arrived, all of a sudden Arsenal's dominance in games improved. Our competitivity in games improved so that we finished in second place last season with Zinchenko at the absolute heart of last season's play. But yes, there are downsides. There are drawbacks. And Gabriel is tasked with a huge job in dealing with kind of mitigating those drawbacks as best that he possibly can. But it is worth pointing out that Zinchenko is not, I don't feel, the long-term future of that left-back position. Jurrien Timber coming into this side is going to be very intriguing. Yes, he can play right back, but he can also play left back, as he has demonstrated and where he started against Nottingham Forest as well, and in the Community Shield against Man City. So don't rule out the idea of Zinchenko progressing to a stage where he actually gets succeeded by Jurrien Timber. Lee says, Tom, in hindsight, do you think that releasing Balogun in the summer was the correct decision, or do you believe that he would have had a part to play in the current team? What are his stats? Now, I mean, before I even look at the stats, I know he's done okay, at Monaco, from just being casually aware of what's gone on. He's currently got 4 goals in 13 games. He's got 3 assists. So 7 goal contributions in 13 games. Very good. Maybe you want more goals in terms of a centre forward, but he's contributing. He's also scored, I think, and I think he's got a couple of penalties maybe in that. So I don't know if all of them are goals from open play. But we made the right decision in the summer. We got a huge amount of money for a player that was not going to be involved this season. And if you think about it, Eddie Nketiah, who I continue to tell you guys, has still delivered a goal, non-penalty goal and assist ratio that is very similar, if not better to that than Ivan Toney's was last season per start. And so for that reason, it's not going to be a situation whereby we end up regretting it. We want him to do well at Monaco because it means that we'll get more money with the clauses, the add-ons that are involved in that. And there's also a sell-on clause in that deal for Arsenal as well. If he was to move on to anybody else, then of course Arsenal would be set to benefit with a sell-on clause that is involved in that deal. So no, I don't think, Lee, that we have any reason to regret Balogun's move to Monaco, and it was certainly the right decision for him, for Arsenal, and for the long-term future of both parties. Let's go to Benji says, ever since he got skinned by Trent, I stopped trusting him defensively. The moment he gets tired around the 60th minute, he becomes a huge liability and it's a ticking time bomb. I mean, he's not the only person to get skinned by Trent. So if you're going to not trust any player that gets skinned by Trent Alexander-Arnold, you're going to find yourself distrusting almost every player that he comes up against because he's very, very good. The fact that it claims that he becomes a liability and it's a ticking time bomb, simply not true. There's situations where Arsenal need a goal at the end of games, and his build-up and his suffocation of the opposition by the way in which he pens the opposition into their right-hand side, Arsenal's left-hand side, is so important to the way that we play. It's no surprise that we brought on Zinchenko for Kiwior in that game against Luton, and it's no surprise that he was involved in the build-up for all of those attacks, which led to us ultimately scoring through Declan Rice. It was him who played the ball to Ødegaard in that space before he then crossed the ball to Declan Rice. He is really important to the way in which we build up play, but there is no point having a discussion about or trying to claim that he's perfect defensively. He's not. He makes mistakes, and that there is drawbacks, but the positives outweigh the negatives by a quite significant amount. Ty says, please remember everything people are saying about Zinni is what Liverpool fans are saying about Trent facing us. It's a really good point. You know, Trent Alexander-Arnold is one of the best players, not just players in his position, one of the most talented footballers in the Premier League. You know, I have a lot of time for Trent Alexander-Arnold as a footballer. I think he's got amazing ability. His execution of his passing is amongst the best in the world. But he always and continues to be focused on as a player that has liabilities and drawbacks defensively. And that is what Arsenal will be looking to exploit. And it's what Liverpool are trying, and Jurgen Klopp in particular, and perhaps Gareth Southgate too. They are trying to find if there is a way to nullify those drawbacks by moving him into midfield. Because if you move him into midfield, you're not going to isolate him in that right back position. And so therefore, he's going to be more influential to do the things that he can do. And Arsenal will need to be really wary of that when it comes to Anfield on Saturday. So loads to discuss when it comes to Trent and Zinchenko. There's definitely similarities between the two. But I'm curious to see how that battle rages on Saturday. Right, let's go to Jabu. Says, I know that we are good. I know that we are very good, but we might need to go counter-attack against Liverpool. Less risky and guaranteed win. Just a thought. It might change today. For me, I'm not entirely sure that that's the right approach. I think the way in which we got our 2-goal lead at Anfield last season was by being aggressive. It was by being threatening and on the front foot as much as we could. It was when we took our foot off the gas against Liverpool and allowed them back into the game that we found ourselves dropping those points. We can go 2-0 up against Liverpool this season, and I feel if we do that, we've got a great chance of winning because we've got players like Declan Rice. Saliba's a year older. Saliba's available. Saliba, of course, wasn't there for that game last season at Anfield. It was Rob Holding that was involved in that game. So without question, having Rice, having Saliba, having these players is going to be having Kai Havertz, I think, is going to change things for us, you know, as well. Granit Xhaka, of course, was involved in that flare up with Trent, which really did change the game. So I think there is a lot of scope to be very excited about what we might be able to do the weekend. There's suggestions that McAllister might not be fit, so that certainly will change things also. So yeah, let's see. Let's see. I think there's scope for some real excitement this weekend. There is over 1,000 of you listening right now. Thank you so much for the support that you always bring to the channel. Do drop a like on the video. Do subscribe if you are new. I'm going to go now and sort out myself because I'm so ill. I can just tell it's building. But thank you. I'll see you soon. And as always, up the Arsenal.